All right, this is Roger Bianchini in the Royal Examiner National Media Studio, and I'd like to welcome Greg Harold and Jeff Brown, new appointees to the EDA Board of Directors here. Thank you guys for coming and taking the time to talk to us about your hopes for the future of economic development in the community.
Thank you,
Roger.
And you're no longer the newest appointees.
You're
Since the
right.
resignation of Vice Chairman Bruce Drummond last week, I think, but Marjorie Martin.
That's correct.
And do you guys know Marjorie at all, or her background?
I know a little bit about her background, but I've never met her.
Okay.
I have no knowledge of the candidate or of the new board director.
All right, well, let me ask you, why jump into the firestorm now? Public anger seems to be growing. The interim mayor has broached the subject of the dissolution of the EDA, which will be a topic of conversation at the Town County Liaison meeting tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Why get into it now? Who wants to go first?
I'll take a stab at it first. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
warm
Or
you
should
up
I
a little
say,
bit.
who's on first?
Exactly. You know, my introduction into the EDA, I've actually been following the EDA since I was in grad school, because I did a capstone thesis project on the Avtex project. And we're going to keep that private because it's somewhat inflammatory. But so I've been following that for quite a while, and as the development of the projects, became more public, and the realization that there may be some issues associated with them, I realized at that time that I might offer, or I might possess, some skill set that would be able to help the organization move beyond where they are right now into the direction that they really need to be working toward. So my beginning really started with officially I should say, with a somewhat curt email to the Board of Supervisors regarding a county issue. And I immediately got some replies from Mr. Carter and Mr. Murray and Mr. Stanley. And the discussions with those three gentlemen, or I should say really Mr. Murray and Mr. Carter, really kind of just began at that point with my background and how I might be able to help with the organization. And of course, my first response, when it was broached to me, was heck no. I'm not going to jump into that fire. But as I started thinking about things and realizing that I could help in certain facets, it did pick my curiosity and my interest. And I met with Mr. Parsons prior to going to interviews or anything like that. We spoke for about an hour and a half.
Doug Parsons, the new executive director.
Thank you. That is correct. And I really liked his position. I liked his demeanor. I liked the way that he was handling the circumstances and what his goals were for the organization. And at that point, I felt that, or I should say that probably really more so solidified my...
I can work with this guy.
Yeah, I could work with this guy. And I think he's a straight shooter, and it's something that we can take places and do great things with. So,
Jeff?
I actually got involved and interested in the EDA before the firestorm.
Before the
broke.
firestorm.
So I was interested in my background. I did a lot of work in Chesapeake right at the time that it was taking off, being the fastest growing city in the country. And I got to see not just their EDA, but all their departments wrestle with some of the tough issues that I think are coming in our direction down 66. And I saw some good things, saw some bad things, but I learned a lot. And when we moved here, I've always gotten involved in projects either locally or internationally, doing something. This made a lot of sense to do it. So I was interviewed in November, just before things took off, and had a lot of time, obviously, to think about whether I really wanted to do it or not, and realized that I really did, that I did have something to contribute. I've got a solid background in communication, and it strikes me that this is a really important area for EDA to step up and do more about being transparent in what it's doing and why it's doing things. I have a background of working with reasonably large organizations and running them, and these are all things that I think would help. But to me, the great benefit to EDA is that it really is an advocate for bringing business into the county, which is a source of tremendous revenue for.
And the town is part of the county.
And the town as well. There's a real revenue source for being able to do things that you want to do in the county. And so to me it was something well worth doing, and I felt that way since. And I would have to say that also meeting Doug Parsons was a real boon. That I really liked his attitude and his approach to doing things, and we saw eye to eye on a lot of topics. So I was thrilled to be appointed to it.
So you both have some communications and management in your background, and I think this all goes to what you're talking about, is the importance of aggressive but measured economic development competition, because all the communities in the state are competing for these companies to come here, the jobs to come.
It's a great point that you make. If I can.
And just to add, and which we sort of alluded to during your comments, is you sort of have the town and county somewhat in competition with each other, and that's a delicate balance, and always has been, especially since the 98-99 corridor agreement and the utilities going out in the corridor, which we have an issue with now with the Crooked Run 2, and why isn't FRLP getting developed in town?
Sure.
But yeah, just a little bit speak to how important it is what economic development authorities do for a community.
Excellent. So I did a little bit of research before this meeting and during the course of the week. There's 95 counties in Virginia, and there are 39 cities in the state. And each one of those, or most of those, have some type of IDA or EDA entity. Currently, there's about 2,500 industrial sites, commercial sites available in the state for activity, for purchase, for lease, for bringing jobs to. The Front Royal Warren County area is in a unique opportunity in the fact that not only are we competing with our own state for jobs and entities to come locate here, but we're on the border of West Virginia and Maryland and even Pennsylvania. So we compete with Martinsburg, we compete with Frederick, Maryland, and we compete with localities in Pennsylvania for the same industries. So having an EDA locally here is really key to making sure that we are represented properly and that we are encouraging and we are aggressively going after those industries that are going to benefit the populace as a whole.
Jeff, like to add something to that?
Yeah, I'll endorse everything that he just said, and I'll just add a couple of things. One of the things that an EDA can do is to bring jobs to the county into the town. Our average commute here is 40 minutes, and I think in the state it's an average of 20. And if you start to bring more jobs into this area, you're going to have shorter commute times, which means people can spend more time with their families, spend more time enjoying this incredible place we live in. That would be one thing. The other thing is
live, work, and shop.
Live, work, and shop.
And
exactly.
play.
And I think that benefits everyone. You also want an EDA in order to retain businesses. Virginia was
very important aspect.
Very important to it. Virginia was just ranked number 1 for business friendliness in a survey. What it means is that in addition to us being able and interested in getting more business, we have all this competition. They're trying to take business from us. So we want to have an environment where businesses feel comfortable here, and it's a win-win for them and for the county and town.
Not only, and just to close with what Jeff said, not only is it a qualitative measurement, but it's a quantitative measurement as well. The jobs that we bring into this industry only benefit everybody that lives here, theoretically, between lower personal property taxes, lower real estate taxes, any taxes that is hitting the consumer that tax benefit or that tax base, when it improves through industry, helps minimize the burden on the actual consumer and the resident of the community. And not only that, but it's the jobs and it's the constantly turning of money in the local economy that continues to spur growth. So those are measurements that aren't always easily seen, but they are very much there.
Right. A huge part of the problem that created the firestorm that we started out with was a lack of seeming due diligence in the oversight, not just by the EDA board, but with the municipalities too, to just do some background checking, some fact checking before authorizing, the community's money to be spent or sent out in certain ways. Do you think that organizational changes, or what can be learned from that, and to see that it doesn't happen again, to just fix the operational processes?
Jeff, you can go ahead,
You go
please.
this
You can
time.
take the first step.
I'll take a shot at it.
There you go.
Well, it's incredibly important that you have an active board and that you have diversity of opinions so that you get a lot of different views. And you're absolutely right. Doing the checking, doing the due diligence, they're all things that you absolutely have to do on a regular basis. EDA is one of those funny organizations where it has to have a degree of secrecy in order to deal with a lot of businesses that are looking at other options. They don't want to have landowners coming and saying, "Oh, I have land for you. I heard you're looking."
Competitive advantages.
Competitive advantages. There's a whole variety of reasons for it, but you have to balance that with transparency and accountability in the processes that you have. And I think that all of us on the board are committed to that. It's a little bit like I remember when I lived up in Northern Virginia, a building that was being built had fallen down partially, and some workers were hurt. And somebody asked me subsequent to that, would you ever live in that apartment building? I said, oh, absolutely, because it's going to be the most watched, regulated apartment building in the entire area. And indeed, that's what it was. And I think the same thing is true with this, that we have a lot of eyes on us, and we know that we've got to do a lot better than what's been done. We have to recognize and we have to acknowledge that things have been done poorly and wrongly, and correct them.
One of my commitments to the county when I took this position was to advocate organizational change as it related to the operational procedures by which we operate from. And one of the things that I presented during my interview process was a leadership framework and operational development plan. It's something that I created a few weeks before the actual interview, and this was basically just my ideas as I saw them, as I read about them, and as I heard about them, about some of maybe the deficiencies that were being or that weren't being really followed. And that's something that I have expertise in, that I can really help the organization out with. This coming up meeting, I'll be making two motions to re-energize or full motion for the reestablishment of the communications committee. I've developed basically a rough draft on how that should operate, and that will be public information during the meeting. I'll also be motioning for a operations committee, which will be developing the framework for the way that we do and conduct business. So those are two of my big projects that I will be working on during my tenure in this time.
Well, you mentioned your interview process and bringing things to the table. I think for a long time there's been a certain amount of public concern about the motivation for people applying for membership on the Economic Development Authority Board of Directors, either self-interest from businesses or conflicts of interest. There was a lot of public comment about relationships that people on the current board had to Valley Health when that whole bond issue was being discussed. Do you think this might be a good time for the county to reconsider what is right now a very closed interview and appointment process with the EDA? Maybe be a little more open about it, let the public know who's looking to be on the board, who's, what the choices are before they're announced? Do you think this could be an opportune time to open that process up a little bit? I know they've always fallen behind, it's a personnel matter, but
Yes.
really it's a hiring matter more than a personnel matter. What do you think, Jeff?
Well, I think you have to figure out what the laws allow you to do and follow them. And I'm not sure that I fully understand whether or not there is a confidentiality issue that you have to respect and work with. I like the idea of the public having a better idea of who we are. I mean, this is one of the reasons we're here today, is to introduce ourselves and let people get a better sense of how we are. And I'm certainly committed in the communication process to making EDA much more available to have questions asked of it by the press and by the public. I think these are all useful things. In terms of the board being more open in its process, I think that what it could do, if it can't say, here are the people, saying here's the kind of people that we're looking for, and trying to recruit people who meet those qualifications. Mm-hmm. And I think that's good. I think one of the problems that the county's had for a long time is a difficulty in recruiting people. And if there is any use coming out of the horrible mess that we find ourselves in, it's that people are stepping up and realizing it's really important that they participate in what we do. And I love the fact that in the last interview process, there were 19 candidates that came up to get involved in EDA, and I think that it's going over to other boards as well, and I think that's a great and wonderful thing we need to take advantage of.
So there's two answers to that question. There's the technical answer, then there's the
Only
emotional
two?
answer. Only two this time. So Chapter 49 in the Virginia Code says that the EDA board shall be composed of 7 directors appointed by the governing body. So it's not an election process. I've heard out in the public that these members ought to be elected. If that is the position that the community wants to take, it's not a county issue. It's a state issue.
Right.
And they'll need to
Changing
take
state law.
They'll need to take that up with the legislature. However, that being said, I don't know if people really fully understand the magnitude of the amount of public appointments that are within the county. Right now, there's 4 positions open. There's the Board of Zoning Appeals, Northwestern Community Services Board, Community Policy and Management Team, and the Warren County Airport Commission. Not only that, but there are 2 pages of board positions that need to be filled. These positions, they have different expiration terms, and they have different numbers of people. There could be 70 appointments on any number of these particular boards cumulatively that the board has to fill. So in this last instance, when Mr. Drummond resigned from the EDA, the Board of Supervisors wanted to move quickly on the replacement, so we have a full contingent, so we can move this organization forward.
Unfortunately, they had just interviewed 19 people.
And they did, and so they had a great pool of candidates to work from, and they were able to move on that quickly. So the structure always does not allow for as much disclosure as you want by virtue of having so many people on public boards, having so many public boards, and having such a varied, what is the word I'm looking for? Expiration of when those terms actually expire. One thing that I try to do to change the culture when I was appointed is I spoke at the meeting. I spoke that I was a candidate, and that if anybody wanted to have any questions or discussions with me at that meeting, that I would sit in the back and I would field their questions and answer anything that I could within the confines of my knowledge. Unfortunately, nobody took me up on that, but I have tried to open up that process a little bit. But keep in mind, this is a job interview, and it is not an election process. How can the county better advertise candidates or open positions? Maybe they could look at that a little bit more closely. I don't have the answer to the solution to that right now, but I believe there is opportunity for that.
So there's room for all of us to educate ourselves on what
Correctly.
is allowed as far as transparency in the selection process. And I think people that want to get involved and more involved, that their attention has been attracted by what's gone on and what's been alleged to
Correct.
have gone on.
Absolutely.
Educate themselves a little more about
Mhm.
how the process works. Some of the things you're pointing out that I wasn't even aware of, some of these
Absolutely.
numbers.
Mhm.
And all of us get into a better position as a member of the public, the media, or now you as EDA board members, to see things move forward in the best way possible.
And this happens in the Board of Supervisors meeting all the time. In this past one, Mr. Mabe stood up and announced his candidacy. He didn't have to do that. Why can't an EDA elect or an EDA interviewee stand up at a meeting, at a future meeting, or at a meeting where they might be up for nomination or interview at the following one and announce to the public?
And that is largely in the person's purview. 'Cause
It is.
in a personnel matter, the person who is the personnel at issue, they are open to release whatever they want.
Correct.
Whereas the employer is not.
That is correct.
So, yeah, it would be up on the
That is
people as
correct.
well. Well, I want to thank you guys for taking the time this afternoon, and I guess I'll see you in 2 Fridays at the next monthly meeting,
That is correct.
and look forward to seeing how things develop.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your
Enjoyed it.
time.
And that's a wrap for the Royal Examiner and our 2 not newest, but new EDA board members, Greg Harold and Jeff Brown.